Chapter 301, Tamer's Battle Week 37. Taro descended in free fall, but Rin wasn't satisfied with that. He captured him in mid-flight and pulled to increase his falling speed, directing him headfirst toward the ground with brutal force. The impact would have knocked any normal opponent unconscious, but Taro had an ace up his sleeve. Just before his head struck the ground, he channeled his beetle's elemental control, instantly softening the earth. His head and part of his torso sank into the modified terrain, considerably cushioning the impact. "Ingenious!" exclaimed men from the stands, impressed by his friend's adaptation. But Taro didn't stop there. While partially buried, his mineral armor began to transform rapidly, sharp spikes emerging from its surface in all directions like a defensive hedgehog. The crystalline protrusions glinted in the arena light, forming a deadly barrier around his body. Ren jumped back just in time to avoid being impaled, but his expression showed more satisfaction than frustration. "I knew it wouldn't be that easy," he murmured, as Taro freed himself from the ground with a powerful elemental push that sent dirt flying in all directions. Without giving Taro time to completely stabilize, Ren counterattacked. This time, he covered the surface of his feet into something similar to diamond. The kick connected cleanly with Taro's side, breaking several of the spikes and sending him flying several meters through the air until he landed heavily. "That," gasped Taro as he got up, small cracks now visible in his armor, where the reinforced foot had impacted. "Hurt a bit." Rin observed how Taro's armor regenerated while he circled him cautiously, evaluating his strategy. The blows were effective in destabilizing Taro, but not enough to overcome his extraordinary defense. The living tunnel's minerals were formed almost as quickly as they were damaged, flowing like liquid before hardening again. He needed something more decisive. Taro had completely recovered, so Rin decided to change tactics again. He launched himself forward as if he were going to repeat the previous attack pattern, but at the last instant he slid under Taro's guard, aiming directly at one of his joints. With another technique learned from his teacher, Rin caught Taro's right arm in a perfectly executed lock. Using his superior strength, he began applying pressure, seeking to force a surrender without causing real damage. "Surrender," Rin urged, increasing the tension. Taro grunted with the effort of resisting, but he had another resource. His mineral armor, controlled by the hunter bug, began to flow like a liquid, trying to envelop Rin and trap him in a crystalline embrace that would harden around his limbs. Too good of a defense. Rin freed himself with an explosive movement, moving away just before the armor could solidify around his extremities. "I think I shouldn't have given you such a problematic beast combination." Taro smiled, his breathing labored but his determination intact. "Ready for another round?" Rin studied him for a moment, his mushrooms pulsing as he made a decision. He had been avoiding a certain tactic, considering it potentially unfair to Taro, but his friend's resistance left him no alternative. "Sorry about this," he murmured, more to himself than to Taro. With an explosion of speed that surprised even those familiar with his capabilities, Rin launched himself forward, in a movement almost imperceptible due to its rapidity. He swept Taro's legs with a perfectly executed circular kick so fast that it didn't give his friend even time to transform his armor. Before Taro could even fall, Rin positioned his back on the ground, both feet coated with diamond protection to avoid damage from the forming spikes. With a coordinated push of his legs, he catapulted Taro upward. "Again with the throws!" exclaimed Taro as he rose higher this time, mentally preparing to modify the ground again and cushion his fall. But elevating Taro wasn't Ren's final objective. While his friend reached the highest point of his trajectory, Ren was already in motion. He launched himself running at maximum speed, perfectly calculating the point where Taro would begin to descend. Then, in a maneuver that drew collective gasps from the audience, Rin jumped with the accumulated momentum and executed a perfect drop kick, his reinforced feet connecting directly with Taro's side in midair. The impact was brutal and resonated throughout the arena, sending Taro flying in a new trajectory, completely out of his control. He spun several times in the air before landing heavily and rolling several meters by inertia, leaving a trail in the arena's dirt. Rin landed gracefully and rose immediately. To everyone's surprise, Taro stood up again. His armor showed significant cracks where the impact had occurred, but the damage was still minor and already regenerating. He staggered slightly, evidently dazed by the spins he took, but his posture indicated he was ready to continue. "That," he murmured, shaking his head to clear his vision. "That was good." Rin advanced a few steps, for what Taro thought would be another exchange. But then something strange happened. He stopped abruptly, bringing a hand to the back of his neck with a remorseful expression. "I'm sorry, Taro," he said loudly enough for his friend to hear. Taro looked at him confused, not understanding why Ron was apologizing again in the middle of combat. "What are you going on about?" It was then that Lynn advanced to the center of the arena, her professional expression carrying a flash of amusement in her eyes. "Victory for Ren Patender," she announced, "by opponent's exit from the combat area." Taro blinked in bewilderment and then looked at his feet. Indeed, Ren's powerful impact had sent him completely outside the marked circle that delimited the official combat zone. He was standing in the neutral space between the arena and the stands, disqualified without even realizing it. "Oh!" was all he could say, between surprise and resigned laughter. I should have seen that coming. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic, rippling through the stands. Rin retracted his claws, offering his hand to Taro. "That double armor of yours is ridiculously resistant," he commented, a genuine smile on his face. "You forced me to use dirty tricks." Taro accepted the hand, acknowledging his defeat with a small tinge of disappointment. "You hit as if you were triple your size," he responded, returning the smile. "I was a fool to think I could hold out until you got tired. You always find some solution, not dirty, creative." As both headed toward the exit, the crowd continued applauding. It wasn't just a demonstration of skill they had witnessed, but an exhibition of true camaraderie, where respect and admiration transcended the competition itself. Min was waiting for them at the entrance, his expression reflecting pride and a bit of envy. "That armor battle," he declared, putting an arm over each one's shoulders, "was the coolest thing I've seen in the entire tournament. And that includes myself." The three laughed as they walked away. Chapter 302, Tamer's Battle Week 38. Klein Goldcrest observed his reflection in the mirror, while a medical auxiliary applied the final treatment to the burn marks that still persisted on his arms. Leora's darkened flames had left scars that were taking time to completely disappear, but his general condition was remarkable considering the intensity of the combat he had faced. Cashin's words resonated in his mind like an inescapable mantra, each syllable etched into his consciousness. "At least your image won't be completely ruined," his brother had told him during his visit to the infirmary, his tone mixing contempt with a hint of reluctant approval. "Your strategy against the Ashenway and the Dravenholm was decent this time. I suppose Father would be less disappointed than usual." Coming from Cashin, that almost qualified as praise. "But now," he had continued, leaning in so only Klein could hear him, his breath hot against Klein's ear, "you must prove your individual worth. You cannot afford another failure. The Goldcrest do not accept mediocrity. Do you understand?" Klein had nodded, the weight of family expectations bearing down on his shoulders again with greater intensity as he felt minimally supported. "Don't worry, brother," he had responded with confidence. "Kai will be barely a minor obstacle." Now, as he prepared for his individual combat, Klein mentally reviewed his techniques. The additional power of the adaptation potion still circulated through his system, a subtle but significant reinforcement that made his muscles feel denser, more responsive. "Would you like to be a double two?" Cashin had murmured when Klein opened his eyes wide. "But all in good time, little brother. All in good time." The roar of the crowd from the arena broke his reflections. It was time. From the stands, Min and Taro observed with evident interest, both animated by the prospect of seeing one of Jin's followers or Klein eliminated. Regardless of who emerged victorious, it would be a gain. "Who should we support?" asked Taro, though his tone suggested the question was merely rhetorical. His fingers tapped nervously against his knee, still feeling the phantom impacts from his earlier battle with Ron. "Whoever loses," replied Min with mischievous smile. "Personally, I hope they somehow eliminate each other." Ren, seated between them, maintained his usual analytical expression, while observing Klein enter the arena with a slightly strange countenance. "Klein will win easily," he commented, surprising his friends. "His beast is not only a superior rank, but his technique has improved considerably from what we saw in his previous team encounter. "Are you praising Klein?" asked Min, feigning horror. "Are you feeling all right?" He dramatically placed a hand on Ren's forehead, as if checking for fever. Ren sketched a slight smile. Recognizing an opponent's capabilities isn't praising them. It's basic knowledge. The combat began with Lin's signal. Kai, evidently nervous about facing Klein, immediately activated his green scales. His skin acquired that characteristic stone texture while adopting a defensive posture. Klein, in contrast, seemed almost bored. He partially fused with his golden lion, his eyes acquiring that supernatural glow while his hands transformed into the now-feared claws that could launch phantom cuts. His posture was relaxed, confident, the stance of someone who considered the outcome a foregone conclusion. "I hope you haven't forgotten the hierarchy of our groups like your friend Jean did upon reaching bronze this semester by pure luck," commented Klein. "Though I suppose you haven't increased rank, so the success hasn't gone to your head. Being still iron this will be even quicker, though." Kai didn't respond verbally. Instead, he activated his lizard speed ability as he darted to the side in an attempt to flank his opponent. It was a strategy that might have worked against some opponents, but Klein seemed to perfectly ignore it. Klein also roared, without even fully turning. He extended his left hand backward, his phantom claws connecting with the scales of a paralyzed Kai who had tried to circle around to attack. The sound wave had momentarily frozen Kai's muscles, leaving him vulnerable at the worst possible moment. The attack was devastating. The claw's ability penetrated Kai's physical defenses as if they didn't exist. The green scales cracked in several places, and most were momentarily destabilized by the lack of others for the mana flow that Ren had once explained the functioning of. Before Kai could recover, Klein fully turned, his second claw heading directly toward his opponent's solar plexus. The blow connected on target, and Kai collapsed, his breathing ragged as he struggled to maintain consciousness. His scales dimmed, losing their vibrant green color as a connection to his beast faltered. A stunned silence fell over the arena. The entire combat had lasted less than a minute. "Victory for Klein Goldcrest," announced Lin, her professional expression unaffected as such an outcome was easy to expect. From the stands, Min let out a low whistle. "Well, that was quick." "I told you," commented Run. "Klein had quite an advantage. We'll see how he does in upcoming matches against tougher opponents, though. Like against you," observed Taro, catching the implication. His eyes darted between Run and the retreating figure Klein, imagining the potential matchup. Ren nodded slightly, his eyes following Klein as he left the arena, without even glancing at his defeated opponent. Exactly. The next combat generated a completely different expectation. The battle between Leora and Larissa wasn't just another tournament confrontation. It was a clash between cousins, friends, and most importantly, representatives of two of the city's most powerful families. "I expected this to happen later in the tournament," commented Larissa as they entered the arena together, her tone full of resignation. Leora nodded, a tense smile on her lips. "Bad luck with the pairings. But don't expect me to hold back." Her will-o'-wisp flickered around her fingers, the blue flames casting dancing shadows across her face. "I never would," replied Larissa, returning the smile with one of her own. "In fact, I'd hate it if you did." Lin, perceiving the unique tension of this confrontation, studied them briefly before giving the usual instructions. "Begin," she announced finally, stepping back to give space to the combatants. Unlike most confrontations, neither immediately launched into attack. Instead, they began to circle slowly, studying each other with the intensity of someone who perfectly knows their opponent's capabilities. As if in a dance they had practiced countless times. Leora was the first to move, her will-o'-wisp manifesting in a sky-blue flash. She executed a quick spatial jump, reappearing behind Larissa in a blur of blue light. But Larissa, having anticipated the movement, was no longer there. She had executed her own jump, materializing exactly behind where Leora had reappeared. The golden glow of her transport lingered for a moment where she had been, like an afterimage of pure light. "They know each other too well," observed Min, genuinely fascinated by the dynamic. His eyes darted back and forth, trying to follow the rapid spatial jumps. Chapter 303, Tamer's Battle Week, 39. The first second of combat continued with this pattern. Perfectly timed spatial jumps, attacks that found only air, defenses that anticipated movements that hadn't yet begun. It was a demonstration of profound mutual knowledge, each cousin moving with the anticipation that comes only from years of training together. Shared experience is a double-edged sword, commented Run, looking at Taro. You know your opponent's weaknesses, but they also know yours. Without a clear advantage, despite the recent battle against Klein's team, neither cousin showed signs of mental fatigue. Their movements were intense, each seeking the single opening that could unbalance the combat. What was particularly interesting to Run was how Leora seemed to be containing part of her power. Her will-o'-wisp maintained that characteristic sky-blue tone, showing no indications of the darkening she had exhibited in her combat against Klein. She doesn't want to use the bash, murmured Run. She's respecting Larissa's decision to keep her second beast secret. Do you think Larissa will never show her second beast? Asked Taro. I'm not sure how bad it really is for her to show it, murmured Run, feeling a bit guilty again for having forced her to do what she seemed to desire in her subconscious. In the arena, the balance began to subtly tilt. Despite having a much more powerful offense, Leora was finding it very difficult to connect a single significant attack. Larissa, with much less attacking power but more defensive and calculating style, employed her spatial jumps with absolute economy. They're on opposite sides of specialization, observed Ren. Leora has devastating offensive power, but relatively weak defense. Larissa possesses extraordinary defensive control, although her attack capability is more limited. So, who wins in a confrontation like this? Asked Min, curious. Larissa has less damage, but it's not low. A single well-executed attack will eliminate Leora too. In theory, whoever connects the first significant blow will win, replied Ren. Leora only needs to connect once in the same way to break Larissa's high defense, and the combat would end almost instantly. They're evenly matched due to the rule-specific situation. As if hearing Ren's analysis, Larissa executed a maneuver that risked all her mana to achieve that single direct attack. After several spatial jumps that seemed random but followed a specific pattern, she created crystalline formations that dispersed light in a peculiar way, generating multiple reflections of herself. The mineral constructs shimmered throughout the arena, each one a perfect mirror image of Larissa, poised and ready to strike. Leora, who could see her opponent's mana, wasn't concerned about the situation and activated her mana vision, forcing her eyes to avoid confusion with the reflections. Her gaze sharpened as she scanned the crystalline duplicates, searching for the true signature of Larissa's power. Larissa, who had been waiting precisely for this decision, appeared instantly behind one of the mirrors. Leora was confident that Larissa couldn't use this to hide from her attacks that could be guided, so she launched her fire spirits to surround the crystal, but Larissa didn't intend to use the crystal as defense. Her mineral fairy projected a powerful flash of golden light, in the style of Ren's kidnap from that day, which reflected off the crystal and blinded Leora, who had her eyes wide open using mana vision. Larissa jumped just as Leora closed her eyes and appeared with her mineral spear right beside Leora. She didn't stab her, she just struck her hard in the head with the handle. The impact was clean and decisive. The will-o'-wisp vanished in a blink of blue light, and Leora fell to her knees while struggling to maintain consciousness, her connection to her beast momentarily disrupted by the strike. You tricked me, she declared, staggering. Well played, cousin, she said just before the lights went out. Lynn advanced to the center of the arena. Victory for Larissa Dravenholm. The applause was immediate and respectful, despite its relative brevity. The combat had shown a level of speed and technique that impressed even older students. Larissa approached Leora while an auxiliary healed the possible contusion before it could generate permanent damage. Your fire is still terrifying, she commented with a genuine smile. If I had lost concentration for 1 second. In the stands, Selfra Ashenway observed the scene with a neutral expression. Her lips tensed briefly before letting escape a barely perceptible sigh. It wasn't the victory she would have preferred, but at least there was a consolation. At least Leora can still win the final with Larissa in the team section, she murmured to herself, her fingers gently drumming on her seat. Larissa had better win the individuals too. Only then will Leora have lost the number one. Her gaze momentarily shifted to another sector of the arena, where a boy with luminescent mushrooms in his hair attentively observed the combat. Her eyes narrowed slightly before returning her attention to the central arena. The rest of the day's combats transpired, without particularly memorable incidents. Some students showed promising techniques, others confirmed expectations, but none generated the level of interest that the battles between members of Group B had provoked. The next day began with the semi-finals of the team combats. Ren's team faced a trio from Group D that had surprisingly advanced far thanks to a combination of compatible beasts. However, the Grey Wing proved to be vastly superior. The victory was clear and quick again, their strategy dismantling their opponents in less than 1 minute. The second combat pitted Larissa's team against a trio from Group A. The cousins, along with Maria, who had completely recovered, deployed a defensive strategy that systematically frustrated each attempted approach by their opponents. Larissa and Leora's spatial jumps, combined with the solid defense of Maria's armadillo against a team that didn't have the firepower of Klein's, resulted in a victory that made clear why they were considered favorites by many. The team's final ended up entirely in the hands of Group B. Team Ren versus Team Larissa in what promised to be an exceptional confrontation. It wasn't just a clash between talented students. It was a collision between different philosophies of power, between aristocratic talent and the new lucky ones of the supposedly mediocre wing. With enough time before the end of the day, Lynn announced that they would continue advancing in the individual tournament. To select the 8 finalists among the 24 qualifiers, she explained, a system of buys has been implemented based on previous performances and accumulated scores. The announcement generated some confusion among less familiar first-year spectators with the tournament procedures. Lynn quickly clarified. Participants with the highest scores in previous battles will advance directly to the quarterfinals, while the rest must compete to obtain the remaining places. The list appeared on the stadium's giant screens, provoking a new wave of murmurs. Ren Pattender, Larissa Dravenholm, Klein Goldcrest, and Luna Starweaver had qualified directly to the quarterfinals thanks to their exceptional previous performances. The qualifying combats determined the 4 remaining students, a single student from each Group A, B, C, and D. At the end of the day, when the pairings for quarterfinals were announced, new expectations arose among the audience. Larissa Dravenholm will face Luna Starweaver. Klein Goldcrest will match with Ren Pattender. Both combats will take place tomorrow after the team's final. Chapter 304, Tamer's Battle Week 40, Team's Final. For Ren and his friends, the announcement meant that tomorrow will be the most important day of the tournament. Ren would individually face Klein in what they considered an implicit rematch, payment for their first friendly encounter in combat class. An intense day, commented Taro as they returned to the dormitories. But we should be grateful, smiled Min. His usual energy barely diminished after a full day of competition. We could be completely out of the tournament. Ren walked in silence. Tomorrow would not only determine who the strongest first-year students were, it would also establish hierarchies and expectations that could endure throughout their education at the academy. Klein isn't the same one we face in the middle of the year, he finally said, his voice quiet but firm. But neither am I. Min and Taro exchanged glances, recognizing the determination in their friend's voice. As the sun set over the academy, the 8 finalists prepared in their own way for the decisive battles of the next day, most aware that the tournament wasn't simply a school competition, but a declaration of intentions and capabilities before a world that was watching them attentively. The dawn of the decisive day arrived, the entire academy full with anticipation, as the final preparations for the tournament's culminating battles were completed. In the hallways, rumors and informal bets proliferated. In the rooms, the finalists reviewed strategies one last time. The Grey Wing team was now heading toward the preparation area when they crossed paths with Larissa's team in one of the less-traveled corridors. The casual encounter created a moment of silence as both groups studied each other. It was Larissa who broke the ice, advancing with that aristocratic grace that seemed as natural to her as breathing. "Ren," she greeted with a slight nod. "I wanted to thank you again for everything, especially the guided visits to the depths and your help during the final collection exam." A fleeting smile crossed her face. "Although that last one got quite out of control, it wasn't your fault, so—" Rin returned the gesture. It was nothing. We all learn from those experiences. I also wanted to ask you to forgive me, continued Larissa, her voice adopting a more formal tone. I'll go all out today, but without making obvious my use of the links. I'll understand if you consider that as discourteous, and Rin gently shook his head. For me, you could use it to the fullest, but my mother always says we should put ourselves in others' shoes, so it's your decision. If you need to keep it hidden, I won't take it as an insult or implication that you're underestimating me. On the other hand, intervened Leora, stepping forward with a challenging smile, will use my power to the maximum of what I can extract. So I apologize in advance if you end up a little scorched. I appreciate the warning, replied Rin with a slight smile. But don't think it will be so easy. Min visibly shuddered, slightly pulling at Ren's sleeve. Don't provoke them, he murmured loudly enough for everyone to hear. My ability works against almost everyone, but not against them and their cheating mana eyes. Wait, you also have cheating eyes. Traitor. The tension dissipated amid shared laughter, a moment of genuine camaraderie before the inevitable confrontation. I guess we'll see each other in the arena, concluded Larissa, stepping back to rejoin her team. May the best win, responded Rin as both groups resumed their paths. The stadium was almost completely packed. All finals had been arranged at slightly different times for the convenience of external visitors. Not a single seat remained empty in the stands, and the side corridors were occupied by students who hadn't secured a place but refused to miss the event. Expectation had increased even among the academy. Several professors who had been in charge of managing other arenas could now attend. In the box, Selfra Ashenway maintained her usual composure, though an attentive observer might notice certain tension in her elegantly interlaced hands. However, the most unusual thing was a presence at her side. Julius Dravenholm, dressed in an impeccable official uniform, had made room in his tight schedule to witness the final upon learning of Larissa's participation. It was an expected event. As her brother, he knew that few could defeat that astute girl. But even expecting it, pride couldn't help but emerge from him. I envy you, Selfra, commented Julius with that light tone he used for apparently trivial conversations. Being semi-retired has its advantages. I can't afford these kinds of luxuries very often. Selfra barely turned her head, her expression perfectly controlled as she responded. It's not entirely by choice, my child, and it's not as good as you think. An almost imperceptible smile briefly softened her features. Although on occasions like this, it certainly seems like a blessing. Their conversation was interrupted by the official announcement. Lynn's voice resonated throughout the stadium. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final of the team tournament. Today we will witness the confrontation between two teams that have demonstrated exceptional capabilities throughout the competition. The teams enter from opposite ends of the arena. Rin and Taro took position at Min's sides at one edge of the arena. Across from them, Larissa, Leora, and Maria deployed in triangular formation, their stances revealing the countless hours of training they had undergone together. Combatants prepare, indicated Lynn, positioning herself where she could observe the entire confrontation. Victory will be for the team that incapacitates all members of the opposing team or receives surrender from the leader or last member standing. 30 minutes is the time limit. An expectant silence fell over the stadium as both teams made their final preparations. The air seemed to thicken with tension as spectators leaned forward in their seats. Begin! Lynn's order unleashed a burst of activity. Larissa's team moved first, executing what appeared to be an improved version of the strategy they had used against Klein's team. Larissa and Leora performed simultaneous spatial jumps, disappearing in flashes of light to reappear in flanking positions. Maria, meanwhile, advanced directly toward the front, her armadillo fully manifested, like a small mobile tank. To the surprise of many spectators, Ren's team didn't adopt the defensive formation that might be expected. Ren remained perfectly still as his eyes followed the cousin's movement patterns. "What is he doing?" someone murmured from the stands. "He's letting them take the initiative." Leora, interpreting the apparent passivity as an opportunity, prepared a concentrated burst of will-o-wisp, her flames gradually acquiring that darker tone that indicated the demonic Bash influence. Blue fire coalesced around her hands, deepening to midnight as she channeled her second beast power. "Min, now!" exclaimed Rin at the exact moment Leora charged her attack. And at that point, Min finally got his time to shine. Chapter 305, Tamer's Battle Week 41. What happened next left a large part of the audience impressed. The water from Min's two creatures combined, forming a spiral, and didn't even manifest as a simple elemental counterattack. Instead, it acquired an ethereal quality, very similar to that needed to execute healing, as it collided with Leora's flames. Instead of generating steam and dissipating, the water seemed to combine with the fire, neutralizing it in a way that defied conventional physics. The flames extinguished as if the sum of the two energies equaled zero. The fire and water simply disappeared. "Impossible!" Leora exclaimed to Run, her surprise evident. "You said my fire couldn't be extinguished with water." "I said black fire could not be extinguished with ordinary water," replied Ren, allowing himself a brief smile. "But your fire isn't completely black yet, and I taught Min a trick to attack the negative spiritual properties of black fire." Leora's expression changed from surprise to irritation, and then reluctant respect. "Clever," she murmured, preparing for another attack. But the moment of confusion had cost Larissa's team their initial advantage. Taro had already directed his living tunnel to expand its area of influence, creating minerals in the ground. The earth rippled and shifted as crystalline structures began to form on the surface. Min, now visibly the central part of the strategy as the group's defender, maintained his control over water with a precision that nobody had seen him demonstrate previously. His amphibian and water snake worked in perfect harmony, their powers amplifying each other in ways that made the water move like a living entity. Although perhaps the show of water figures in the air was not necessary for fight. "Plan C," Larissa indicated to her team, quickly adapting to a situation where they had expected Run to surprise them, and Leora's fire wasn't as relevant as they had anticipated. Larissa tried to counteract Taro's mineral formations with her own control, attempting to prevent the construction of a defensive structure that would give them an advantage. Golden light flashed from her hands as she manipulated the earth to push back against Taro's influence. But the Grey Wing team seemed to have anticipated this too. Taro, instead of defending his structures that were beginning to rise, allowed Maria and Larissa to destroy them or return them to ground, only to focus on expanding the affected area even further around them. Larissa realized that Taro was enlarging the area with a bias toward Leora. They wanted to trap her to make some weird move that Ren had developed, no doubt. Or so she thought. On the other hand, the girls had to finish Min somehow. Larissa activated Plan C first, the charge plan, and she launched herself in a direct jump against Min. If she could take him down, it would be exactly like the situation with Klein's team. However, Ren was a much bigger problem than expected, one that could only be understood by experiencing it. Ren's senses, enhanced to more than double, and his super-sensitive mana eyes calculated almost perfectly the final location of the jump. If not for Larissa's links, and its almost full mana pool for generating a second jump out of range almost instantly, Ren's almost instantaneous attack would have knocked her out of the battle. Eliminating Min would be much more difficult than expected, but it was that Min himself who truly shone in this combat. His water control, empowered by the synergy between his amphibian and his snake, allowed him to create formations that not only counteracted Leora's fire, but also hampered the opposing team's movements with constant distance attacks. "That can't be Min!" exclaimed Mayo from the stands. Since when could he do all that? As if mocking the doubts, the boy answered in the form of an impressive spectacle. Min, centralizing all his liquid, created a series of water spears that rose like serpents before converging toward a single point. The combined impact directly hit Maria, who had been focused on destroying another of Taro's mineral formations approaching Leora. The armadillo armor absorbed much of the impact, but the force was enough to send Maria rolling several meters across the arena floor, leaving a trail in the dirt. "Maria!" exclaimed Larissa, momentarily distracted. That second of distraction was all Ren needed. With supernatural speed, he launched directly toward Leora, his light claws manifesting in full movement, trailing luminescent streaks through the air. But Leora and Larissa instantly realized that error. Ren had been too confident and hasty in leaving Min alone. An instant before Run reached Leora, both cousins jumped next to Min. But Taro hadn't prepared his enormous amount of crystals for nothing. While Leora could melt them and Larissa cancel them, the structure wouldn't fall instantly. Taro sent all his energy to the ground the instant Rin jumped and, as they had planned, suddenly raised a mineral. The slow formation from before had been only Ren's planned deception. They could be way faster. The mineral quickly covered Min, and in the trajectory of Ren's jump, a stalagmite appeared. Ren propelled himself with it and destroyed it with a powerful thrust of his legs. The rebound returned him to Min's side in what could be at short distance, almost as fast as a girl's jumps. Trying to take advantage of the moment to finish Min, the girls didn't expect Ren to arrive in less than a second. When they felt Ren next to them, it was already too late. Ren covered Larissa's eyes before they could execute another jump and stretched his hand to reach Leora too. But her jump with the new fire was faster. Taro covered Larissa with mineral and earth, trapping her in a crystalline cage. Leora, seeing that Min was inside the mineral defense, redirected her attack from a few meters away, while Run was busy containing Larissa, so she would be completely trapped with her eyes still closed. Leora's fire tried to embrace Run, but Taro covered him just in time. However, Leora's wide attack raised a complete section of the field. Taking advantage of all this, Maria had gotten up and launched herself against the crystal prison containing Larissa and Min, who were together. Rin finally could release Larissa, as she was fully trapped now, and launch to stop Maria, but when he caught Maria in a hold, reluctant to knock her out abruptly, the maid separated from her beast and sent her armadillo to break the prisons. Chapter 306, Tamer's Battle Week 42. For a moment, it seemed that the Grey Wing team was about to lose their hard-won advantage. Min's prison was the first to break under the onslaught, crystalline fragments scattering across the arena floor as the armadillo's powerful charge connected. Leora concentrated fully, preparing for the moment when Min would emerge from his hiding place. Her hands tensed, blue flames flickering between her fingers as she readied an attack. Not only that, Larissa would be freed too, but then Taro revealed his own ace up his sleeve. His hunter bug slid from the ground, intercepting the armadillo. The creature, until now used primarily to control formations, emerged completely from the ground. Its chitinous body gleamed as it positioned itself between the armadillo and its target. Simultaneously, Min didn't appear. Completely taken by surprise, Leora realized she hadn't been using her mana vision because Min had remained visible. When she tried to activate it, it was already too late. Taro had made a tunnel right below the crystal prison that protected the water tamer. Min appeared behind Leora and directed a powerful water attack in a heavy torrent against the girl. The impact wasn't very strong, but with the elemental disadvantage, it was enough to almost completely consume the energy of her fire. Taking advantage of the general confusion, Rin moved instantly toward Maria. His fingers, guided by the deep knowledge his mushrooms provided, found a specific point in Maria's abdomen. It was a technique he preferred to avoid in normal combat, due to its complexity, but with the girls almost dominated, the time was sufficient and the risk was acceptable. With a precise touch, Rin altered small gates of the mana flow connecting Maria to her armadillo. The effect was immediate. The beast blinked several times before completely vanishing, leaving Maria gasping from the sudden loss of connection. Only Leora remained in the combat, though Min's blow had considerably weakened her position. Her will-o-wisp fire mana had extinguished, but the demonic bash remained at her disposal. The determination in her gaze made it clear she wasn't ready to surrender as she began to rise. But before she could fully recover, Rin launched toward her with a speed that surprised the girl. With agile movements, he took Leora's wrists and immobilized them against the ground, effectively blocking without causing harm, and looked closely at her face. Taro, observing the scene, couldn't help a slight blush coloring his cheeks. "Hey!" joked Min, now more relaxed. This is not the time to bring player Patender to the surface again. From the stands, the wolf tamer observed the scene with an expression difficult to decipher, something that made her father slightly furrow his brow. Rin completely ignored his friend's nonsense, keeping his attention on Leora. "It's over," he said in a calm but firm voice. "Better surrender to avoid getting hurt more or having your mana blocked for a while." Leora looked away, slightly puffing her soaked cheeks in a pout of frustration. She saw Maria holding her abdomen and Larissa trapped in a mineral statue from which only her mouth and nose were free. For a second that felt quite long, she considered her options. Finally, she exhaled a resigned sigh and looked back at Run. Bouncing on Taro's crystals so quickly and saving the counter to the fire you gave me for yourself is too big a disadvantage, she commented with a bit of irritation. But I can't be angry with you when you avoided knocking us out. Unfortunately, you're too strong now, and we would surely lose even without that. I'm sure you'd find another unusual way to win. A small smile formed on her lips as she added, It's hard not to admire you. I surrender for today. Then, in a weak murmur, she added, And thank you for being careful not to hit us hard in the face like with the other boys, even though it made winning harder. Lynn, who had been observing attentively, advanced to the center of the arena. Victory for Team Run, she announced, her voice resonating throughout the stadium. Applause erupted like a storm, quickly growing in intensity. The stands vibrated with excitement as spectators rose to their feet, cheering for the unexpectedly easy outcome. What they had just witnessed was much more than a simple students' combat. It had been a battle of doubles with quite promising capabilities. The most outstanding was in turn the one with, as they thought, had the least potential as a double, but his capabilities continued to surprise many. Rin carefully released Leora from the hold, offering his hand to help her up. She accepted it with dignity and a bit of that admiration she had confessed moments before. But next time won't be so easy, she warned. I'm counting on it, replied Run, his mushrooms pulsing with a calm rhythm, while the Grey Wing team celebrated their victory. Julius Dravenholm observed with an expression that contrasted with Selfra Ashenway's enigmatic smile. His fingers drummed thoughtfully on the armrest of his seat as he reassessed his earlier judgments. For now, however, Ren allowed himself to enjoy the moment. Min, radiant for having finally demonstrated his cool side, couldn't stop relating his master move of distracting figures with increasingly elaborate gestures. His hands traced water patterns in the air as he reenacted his moment of glory. The team battles had concluded, but the day was far from over. In a few hours, Run would face Klein in individual combat. For now, however, he would allow himself this moment of shared triumph with those who had begun as simple dormitory companions and were now much more, a true team that had redefined what it meant to have mediocre beasts in a world obsessed with prestige. Ren, maintaining his serene expression, offered his hand to Larissa to help her out of the now open prison. A fun combat, he commented. Larissa accepted the hand, walking with her dignity intact despite the defeat. It was, she acknowledged, Min was the real star today, added Run, looking toward where his friend received Taro's enthusiastic embrace. He had been perfecting that figure technique in secret for weeks. The figures were useless, weren't they? Commented Larissa, a slight smile forming on her lips. They served their purpose, replied Run, his eyes meeting hers with a smile as well. From the box, Julius observed the scene. Interesting, he murmured, more to himself than to Selphira. Much more than I expected. Selphira said nothing immediately, her eyes fixed on Run, while he celebrated with his teammates. When she finally spoke, her voice had a tone that Julius had rarely heard in her. I think we haven't seen anything yet, Julius. That boy seems to have the bearing and confidence of someone with still much to prove. The individual battles will begin in a few hours, and perhaps they could gain a little more insight into the boy who seemed to have an infinite bag of surprises. Chapter 307, Tamer's Battle Week 43. The boys were about to leave the rest area as they had no serious injuries. While healers attended to any minor injuries and administered pills to restore their mana veins, Ren and his friends observed the battles of students from other years with some interest, but a slightly mocking one. Look at them, commented Min, pointing to a pair of second-year students who were facing each other with iron-rank beasts using rather basic techniques. They're a bit worse than our irons. Taro nodded, distractedly chewing an energy bar instead of pills since he had no more combats today. It's normal. Most keep their beasts at iron until 3rd or 4th year. Fear of ruining their cultivation before mastering the basics. Exactly, confirmed Lou, who had joined them as he also awaited his group's individual combats. Normally, there are always fewer than 5 students who dominate the competitions. They do it almost for free by luck, since having family techniques for their specific beasts and reaching bronze before the others is a huge advantage. Like Klein and Jean, I suppose, deduced Run, his mushrooms pulsing softly as he observed a second-year student executing an inefficient defensive ability. It fared poorly against the attacker's elemental advantage. That must be another reason for their arrogance, Huffman, although I suppose it's been knocked down several notches with the defeats they've received. I'm counting on you to lower another 10 points off Klein's ego. Grind his brain. After finishing the treatment, the boys moved to a different arena to watch higher-level battles. The combats continued. Fourth-year battles showed a somewhat superior level, with more bronze-ranked beasts and much more practiced techniques. But they weren't very far from the first-year battles of this year. Those, at least, are more fun to watch, pointed out Min, genuinely interested in a confrontation between a tamer with a Bronze 2 superior fire lizard and another with a Bronze 1 ice snake. As they walked toward the student food area, Min continued in an excellent mood, clearly still satisfied for having finally been able to show his water figure technique. By the way, he said casually, changing the subject, why didn't you hit the girls? I mean, thanks for giving me more time to shine, but if you had knocked out Larissa like you did with Jean, instead of covering her eyes... Taro slightly choked on his drink at the thought of Rin hitting the poor girl, but his curiosity for the answer was evident in his eyes. Or Maria, continued Min, you could have prevented her from using her armadillo if you had knocked her out from the beginning. And Leora, well, I had already canceled her with my incredible and phenomenal technique. But still, you were very gentle with them, weren't you? Rin considered the question for just a second. They're tough, insisted Min. Surely they wouldn't hate you for a little knockout. Among themselves, they don't fear damage that much either, like when Larissa left Leora unconscious in their confrontation not long ago, remember? My father once told me that a girl should never be hit if it can be avoided. Rin finally responded, his tone casual but with a hint of respect for paternal advice. Something about being popular, gentlemen, and about men's pride. He paused briefly before adding, I don't fully understand it, but my father is usually right about many things, so... Min and Taro exchanged glances, amusement in their expressions. Well, if that makes you popular, maybe we should also try this gentleman's pride thing, joked Min, giving Taro an elbow nudge that provoked another smile from the boy. Ren took advantage of the pause to change the subject. By the way, I've been thinking about sending a letter to my parents. Have either of you sent one? Both Min and Taro shook their heads. I've never sent a letter, admitted Min, although I've heard that my uncles and other noble adults use them occasionally for urgent communications. They always complain about how expensive they are. Same in my family, added Taro. Letters are for business. I really should ask the girls, murmured Ren, more to himself than to his friends. Maybe they know more about how they work. They continued observing battles of senior students, especially impressed by confrontations from 5th year and above, where control and strategy reached levels from which they could learn a trick or two. Finally, the announcement they were waiting for resonated to the arenas. Individual combats of the first group will begin shortly. Ren Pattender against Klein Goldcrest. Present yourselves in Arena 1 in 5 minutes. The moment had arrived. The expectation was noticeable as both competitors entered the arena from opposite ends. The crowd's murmurs grew to a steady hum of excitement as the 2 first years took their positions. Among the audience, opinions were divided, but the majority still favored Klein. The general consensus was that, despite the surprising tournament results so far from Ren's group, a bronze golden lion was still superior to the supposedly iron beast of the new double not-so-double tamer the rare and unexpectedly strong Hydra. What very few understood was that Ren actually possessed a bronze-level beast. It wasn't skepticism from others. Simply, Ren had never found it necessary or important to make everyone see it. Explaining why his fungus was bronze rank would have been complicated, and the reduced size of his fungus core wouldn't help, given the general perception that core size determined a beast's real rank. This collective ignorance was precisely the reason why many believed Klein's roar would be devastating against the supposed iron beasts of the newly generated double tamer. Even if there were 2 of them. For his part, Ren wasn't particularly concerned about the roar, the effect of which worked much better on opponents of lower rank, which he was not. The phantom claws and the slight abyssal sensation he perceived in Klein represented a much greater threat in his book. Klein would have considerable enhancements thanks to his superior lion, and his beast wouldn't be easy to take down if launched at Ren in a direct confrontation. Ideally, Ren would seek to get close enough to connect a precise blow to the Goldcrest's face, similar to their first confrontation. But it was evident that Klein wouldn't make the same mistake twice when he took as his initial position the edge of the demarcated area. Lynn positioned herself between the two, her professional expression hiding any personal preference. Her crane's feathers ruffled slightly in the arena breeze as she prepared to begin the match. "This combat will determine who advances to the finals of the first group," she announced. "The rules remain the same. Are you ready?" Both nodded, their expressions reflecting different types of determination. In Klein, a cold and anxious fury. In Ren, an analytical tranquility that had come to characterize him. Begin. Chapter 308, Tamer's Battle Week 44, Lion Claws versus Light Claws. Klein didn't roar immediately as many expected. Instead, he fully invoked his golden lion, materializing the majestic creature at his side. The feline, slightly larger than in its previous rank, stood as a living shield between Ren and its tamer. Only then, when his beast was fully manifested, did Klein order the roar. The sound reverberated throughout the arena, more powerful when coming directly from the lion than when Klein channeled it through his own throat. The concussive wave of sound made the air itself vibrate, causing several spectators to cover their ears. Ren fused with his hydra while the roar, to the surprise of many, barely seemed to affect him. He was fully prepared. His numerous thin light veins pulsed intensely as he invoked his characteristic long claws, preparing to face the lion in direct combat. Simultaneously, Klein directed his lion to attack. Only when he found himself in trouble, or if the mushroom boy got too close, would he cancel the invocation. It was the most uncomfortable situation Ren could face, directly combating the beast while its tamer remained at a safe distance. However, it wasn't an impossible scenario. What followed left a large part of the audience open-mouthed. Far from being dominated by the muscular beast, Ren kept the confrontation perfectly balanced. His movements were more fluid, faster, each attack and defense calculated to avoid being caught by the rival beast. "Impossible!" exclaimed someone from the stands. "He's matching a bronze lion in direct combat." The explanation, invisible to most, was quite simple. The lion, as a fully invoked creature, possessed more brute strength than it could transfer to Klein when they were fused. However, Ren's unique combination, his muscles, skeleton, and skin fused with those of the Hydra, and all that enhanced by the ring, allowed him to access the true power of the bronze rank. And it wasn't the limited power of a human with bronze enhancements. It was equal to the full manifestation of a beast of that rank. Ren himself was a beast. He and the lion were truly evenly matched in strength. The lion attacked with claws and fangs, each movement charged with force that could shatter ordinary skulls. Ren responded with equal ferocity, his light claws seeking vulnerable points in the feline's anatomy. Each impact generated flashes of light, creating a spectacular display of power that had the audience enthralled. From the upper stands, several figures also observed intensely. Among them, Julius Dravenholm had completely abandoned his facade of diplomatic boredom, leaning forward with genuine fascination. "The boy has too much strength, or he really has a ring, or his little spore evolution is much more than we thought," he murmured. "Not just a rare variation. Perhaps it's the correct path." Beside him, Selphra Ashenway maintained her imperturbable expression, though a gleam had appeared in her eyes. "An unusual technique of double manifestation," she commented, "particularly in someone so young." In the arena, the battle continued to intensify. Klein, seeing that his beast wasn't achieving the expected advantage, began channeling more energy toward the lion, reinforcing each attack with a more abundant amount of mana. The lion responded with stronger vigor, its movements becoming faster, heavier. The golden fur bristled as its muscles bulged, and a new movement negated Ren's distance advantage. "The lion is using the phantom claw," exclaimed someone from stands. The energy surged through the air and the swipe finally connected, grazing Ren's armored shoulder and leaving 3 superficial but painful impact furrows. But Ren didn't cower from pain. Instead of retreating, he took advantage of the momentary pause after the heavy attack to launch a counterattack, his light claws partially penetrating the almost golden skin of the lion and leaving a cut on its maw. The beast roared in surprise and pain, retreating momentarily before regrouping for another assault. The battle between Ren and the lion kept the audience completely absorbed. The clash of light against yellow gold created a mesmerizing spectacle. Yet Klein was not all happy with the situation, so he channeled even more mana toward his beast, his eyes glowing as he established a deeper connection. The lion roared, its mane undulating as if touched by an invisible wind. The beast now attacked with more power. The lion's phantom claws partially penetrated Ren's defenses, leaving glowing traces with each swipe. This new dynamic changed the rhythm of the combat. Ren's long light claws now felt very short. Every time he tried to get close, the feline responded with a phantom attack that forced him to dodge and lose distance. Although the blows didn't cause mortal damage thanks to the Hydra armor, the accumulation of impacts began to take its toll. Small cuts and cracks appeared in Ren's translucent armor, showing that the defense wasn't impenetrable. But Klein, observing from a safe position, also began showing signs of anxiety. Despite his lion's new distance advantage, Ren was still keeping the combat balanced. His strategy wasn't working as effectively as he had hoped. Ren, for his part, faced an increasingly worrying dilemma. Each attempt to close the distance with the lion consumed precious energy. He needed a change in strategy. His mushrooms pulsed intensely as he deeply analyzed each of the lion's movements. There was a pattern, subtle but identifiable, in the way the beast attacked and repositioned itself, an opportunity he could exploit. Ren waited patiently. When the precise moment came, he launched forward with a burst of speed that surprised those who hadn't observed his previous combats. The lion responded exactly as Ren had anticipated, launching a frontal attack with its phantom claws. Instead of dodging, Ren accepted the impact directly, allowing the claws to partially penetrate his defense while continuing his advance. He had achieved the perfect advantage. His light claws headed straight for the lion's throat, a blow that would weaken it considerably or, if not well defended by the mane, potentially end the combat. But Klein, recognizing the danger, executed his planned maneuver. He made the lion return to his body in a beam of light, instantly fusing with the beast just before Ren's claws could connect. He didn't stop there. Immediately afterward, he re-invoked the lion, materializing it to run again to meet Ren. Klein couldn't contain a satisfied laugh at seeing his strategy had worked. "Surprised?" he provoked, his voice loaded with newfound arrogance. "We can do this all day." Ren didn't respond verbally, but his mushrooms pulsed with a rhythm that his friends would have recognized as controlled irritation. The tactic was intelligent. He had to admit, Klein had found a way to neutralize his advantage in close combat. Chapter 309, Tamer's Battle Week 45. The pattern repeated several more times. Ren tried to approach, using increasingly elaborate tactics to get close to the lion or Klein. But on each occasion, just when he seemed about to connect a decisive blow, Klein withdrew his beast and re-invoked it to return Ren almost to his starting point. Ren had taken advantage of each opportunity to get closer to Klein, but the invocation was very fast and came right after his attacks. Because of this, he had only advanced a few meters toward Klein. From the stands, men couldn't contain his frustration. "That's cheating," he exclaimed, though no one except Taro and Lou seemed to pay him any attention. "Technically, it's within the rules," replied Lou, although he also frowned at the tactic. "But it definitely feels very unfair if someone does that repeatedly against you. If Ren keeps attacking the lion, he'll run out of energy before reaching Klein." Observed Min, biting his lip with concern. "But he can't turn his back to the lion either," added Taro, anxious. And indeed, with each new attempt, Ren's armor appeared more damaged. Cracks spread across the translucent surface, and small fragments occasionally broke away with each powerful impact resisted. Klein was elated to be finally winning with a genius strat against the damned rotten boy in front of everyone. His honor would be recovered in front of his brother. Perceiving this growing advantage, he concentrated on his working strategy, maximizing mana efficiency. His lion attacked with greater aggression from a distance, but remained less active when close, forcing Run to weaken his defenses further. Each time Run managed to get closer, the annoying cycle repeated. The distance between Run and Klein had been reduced considerably thanks to persistent advances, but it still seemed insurmountable given the strategy being used. It was then that Run made a decision. His light veins pulsed intensely as he opened his mana-charged eyes wider, concentrating to the maximum. When he sighed and clenched his fists, there was a cold clarity in his gaze that made even Klein feel a pang of unease. Ren initiated what seemed to be another approach attempt. The lion responded with all it had, trying to keep the status quo forcefully and reflecting its tamer's unease. It launched a powerful phantom attack while maintaining its position. This time, however, Ren didn't adjust his trajectory from the beginning and launched himself forward. His chest armor finally broke after taking a hit, but he ended up getting close enough to seriously threaten the beast without compromising too much of his energy. As expected, when Ren finally was about to connect a blow, Klein withdrew his lion again, fusing it with his body. It was the moment Ren had been waiting for. Instead of stopping or showing frustration, Ren smiled. His light claws shone with greater intensity and with a powerful and fluid movement that no one had expected. He projected them forward. The light phantom claws traversed the space, separating the combatants. Klein, completely unprepared for this distance attack, barely had time to register what was happening before the claws caused small cuts on his nose and chin. They weren't serious wounds, but the shock was considerable. The projected attack had traveled much further than anyone would have believed possible from a first-year student. Unlike Klein's phantom claws, which barely reached 3 meters, these covered approximately 15 meters before barely connecting with their target and dispersing. A collective gasp ran through the stands as spectators processed what they had just witnessed. Ren's light claws, until now considered exclusively short-range weapons, had been launched at a distance 5 times greater than Klein's phantom claws. "I didn't calculate well the distance I could launch them," murmured Run, loudly enough for Klein to hear. The smile on his face suggested that, while the comment was sincere, the result had been more than satisfactory. Ren couldn't hear well through his earplugs, but he didn't need to hear to understand the curses of his opponent or that face. Klein brought a hand to that same face, his face, touching the small cuts incredulously. The blood on his fingers confirmed this was an illusion. He had been hit directly despite his careful distancing strategy. "Incredible!" exclaimed a 6th-year student. Patender has shown a variation of the Phantom Claw technique much better than the original with a beast that wasn't known to have it. This completely changes the combat distance dynamic again. From her surveillance position, Lin couldn't help a smile of pride. There was a theory that many mana techniques weren't entirely dependent on the development or type of beasts, but using them before certain ranks seemed to be too difficult for children of low rank. Few had managed to copy techniques of other beasts with theirs at higher ranks, but copying them at the same or lower rank, with a beast not specialized in the ability like the lion and with much greater performance. A true genius. "How?" began Klein, genuinely disconcerted. "That shouldn't be possible. Abilities are—" Ren didn't respond. He hadn't heard. Instead, he adopted a new offensive posture, his light claws shining again while his light veins and mana-saturated eyes pulsed once more with a rhythm suggesting deep concentration. The message was clear. The battle for supremacy of the longest attack distance had a new leader, and as Klein frantically reconsidered his strategy, a certainty settled among all present. The boy with luminescent mushrooms, again, had more surprise in store than anyone could have imagined. Taking advantage of the moment of shock, Ren took a firm step forward and launched another attack with his projected claws. Klein, completely paralyzed by surprise, had no time to react. The light claws traversed the space between them in an instant, cutting Klein's chest while he remained fused with his lion. The impact was more severe than Ron had intended, thinking Klein would invoke the lion in front of him on time. The fabric of Klein's uniform tore, and crimson lines began to spread rapidly from the cuts. The gold crest fell to his knees, his face contorted in an expression of genuine pain. Lin, observing the gravity of the situation, immediately advanced to stop the combat. Her hand was already raised to make the signal that would call the healers. But then, something unexpected happened. Chapter 310, Tamer's Battle Week 46. Klein raised his head and let out a roar that shook the entire arena. It wasn't the normal bellow of his lion. It was something more primitive, more visceral. His features began to change even more, becoming more feline. His eyes acquired an unnatural verticality, and the characteristic gold of his beast darkened to an amber hue that bordered on purple. Most surprising was that the wound on his chest began to visibly close, replaced by lion fur. The blood stopped flowing, and the edges of the cuts began to fill in, golden hair sprouting where there had been torn flesh moments before. Klein slowly stood up, his gaze fixed on the ground, an unsettling energy emanating from his figure. The air around him seemed to waver, as if distorted by intense heat. Rin observed him with growing concern. His mushrooms pulsed frantically as he detected the subtle but unmistakable abyssal energy manifesting again. The mana pattern in Klein's body was transforming, adopting configurations that contradicted the natural laws of the world's energy flow. From his seat in the upper stands, Cassian Goldcrest leaned forward, his expression showing amazement and alarm. He couldn't feel the abyssal energy, but the power increase he was witnessing far exceeded the 10% that a simple initial adaptation potion should provide. It was approaching 50%, a level he hadn't remotely anticipated. Understanding struck Rin like lightning. Thanks to his enhanced reception and the knowledge accumulated in his world mushroom about mana patterns, he could glimpse what would happen if that anomalous flow continued to expand. Without thinking twice, he began running toward Klein. "Stop," he shouted, quickly approaching. "Don't be an idiot. If you continue like this, you're going to alter your beast into something it doesn't want to become." Klein responded with another roar, more powerful than the previous one. His lips moved, forming words that Rin couldn't hear, clearly due to the plugs he had placed in his ears before combat. Rin quickly removed them, trying to better understand what Klein was trying to say. The action seemed to further enrage Klein upon seeing the earplugs. His mana visibly darkened, black spots appearing in the gold of his aura. "Nobody listens to me," complained Klein, his voice full of rage and a deep sadness that surprised Rin. "They only hear what they expect to hear. Goldcrest this, Goldcrest that." He raised his gaze, his eyes now completely feline, but with a painful humanity still visible in them. "They lied to me. Nobody cares about my renown, neither Luna nor your damn luck and ridiculous power. I'm alone. My real needs, nobody, not my friends, not my brother, not my father really listens to them. It's all about pretending for a sliver of recognition." The mana around Klein darkened even more, acquiring an almost purple tone at certain points. The transformation of internal mana was progressing at an alarming rate. "The problem," responded Rin, maintaining his close distance without retreating, "is that I've only heard you say nonsense until now." The words seemed to hit Klein like a physical whiplash. He roared again, this time consciously channeling the dark power to amplify the attack. The sound wave hit Rin directly, whose now unprotected ears began to bleed from the intensity. The world became silent for Rin, the roar leaving a persistent buzz that drowned out all other sounds and caused partial paralysis in his body. But despite the pain and effect, he remained firm in his place, his eyes fixed on Klein's face. "But what you just said, though I hadn't got it first, what you said just now wasn't nonsense," shouted Rin, not sure how loudly he was speaking due to the damage to his ears. "I did hear you, though not with my ears. But I read your lips and your expression." Klein seemed momentarily disconcerted, the flow of dark mana faltering briefly. "It hurts so much. I never wanted this, you traitor brother," quoted Rin, repeating the words that Klein had initially muttered, when he believed no one had heard him. A flash of vulnerability crossed Klein's transformed face. But then the pain of the transformation returned with renewed intensity, extending not only in his body, but in his mana core, in his soul, the Tamer's connection. The black mana began to emanate from him like visible mist. Rin understood there was no time for subtleties. Channeling his own energy, he intensified the glow of his veins, retracting the light claws, creating a luminous counterpoint to the darkness that enveloped Klein. "I don't like you," he declared with brutal frankness. "You're a pretentious rich kid who thinks the world owes him something." The dark mana undulated, responding to the provocation. "But," Continued Run, his voice acquiring a softer tone. I can't refuse to listen to the first non-half-witted thing you said. He extended his hands. So I'll do everything in my power and free you from this. His eyes shone with maximum intensity as Rin deeply analyzed the corrupt mana pattern flowing through Klein. There was a structure in that chaos, a twisted but recognizable design for someone with his special perception. Klein, feeling the pain intensify, roared involuntarily, but Rin resisted, gritting his teeth. Identifying the nodal point where the corruption originated, Rin gathered his energy. It wasn't the devastating beam he had used on desperate occasions. It was a more controlled version, specifically calibrated for this purpose. Rin released the beam, directing it precisely toward the core of the corrupt energy in Klein's body. The impact was immediate and spectacular. The golden light of the beam seemed to absorb the darkness, neutralizing it as it expanded through Klein's mana system. For a moment, the gold crest stood with his expression frozen in a mixture of surprise and, perhaps, relief. Then the light faded and Klein collapsed, unconscious but free from corrupting influence. Absolute silence fell over the arena as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. The powerful light had been something more than a genius's technique. Lynn cautiously advanced, first checking Klein's condition before approaching Run. "What just happened?" she asked quietly with concern. Rin, still affected by the damage to his ears, could barely distinguish her words, but the question in her eyes was clear. His beast was getting out of control. He responded simply, with exhaustion but also satisfaction at having intervened in time. I managed to counteract it. Lynn studied Run with an indecipherable expression as healers quickly entered the arena. Part of her wanted to press for more explanations, but the condition of both combatants made it evident that those questions should wait. Rin was about to faint. So first, victory for Ren Pattender, she finally announced, her voice resonating throughout the stadium. The applause was enthusiastic, but tinged with confusion. The spectators hadn't fully understood what they had just witnessed, only that it had been extraordinary and completely unexpected. Rin staggered, but Lynn caught him with her body, keeping him upright with a bit of cheating to preserve the winner's honor.